Good evening, afternoon, morning, night, whenever you find your way to see or watch this podcast. I'm joined once again as Omar from the Hardware Pod, and I'm joined once again by an old friend of the podcast. Sorry, I just saw a tweet notification on my phone. By an old friend of the podcast, Dan the Man Steenkamer, our resident CAA expert, and I mean all other FCS really football expert. So Dan, how's it been?
It's been good. It's been busy. I've been doing some summer work, some off season grinding a little bit, just getting the budget ready for this fall and hoping to travel around a little bit again, see some more venues and things like that. So life's good. But it's good to catch up with you. I know we had a false start and getting connected, so I apologize for that in front of everybody. I know you've been saying no, but I apologize for that. It's good to be back though. And this is a nice topic because I think this is a program we're about to discuss who really doesn't get enough shine, and for a number of different reasons. But I think especially in the new look CAA, you can't rule this team out being a more frequent contender.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, shoot, no need to apologize on air. I mean, I totally understand things happen. But yeah, like I mean, for me, I mean, I'm more of a sort of like logistics of college football guy. And as a fan of the history of college football, I mean, I like the allure of intersectional matchups. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today, as well as an outlook of the program. I mean, if you're not a CAA connoisseur, like FCS uniform connoisseur, you would not, I mean, you would have guessed by now that we're talking about the Maine Black Bears. And the root of this conversation is earlier this week they scheduled, or either this week or last week, they scheduled an away game at Florida International in Miami. And I mean, this would fly by under the radar if it wasn't for another game this season, in fact, where they go all the way to Albuquerque, New Mexico to play the New Mexico Lobos. And this also, too, concurrently, oddly enough, the Maine Black Bears also scheduled a couple of road games with Boston College, continuing that long-standing series with the Boston College Eagles. But it raises the question, too. It's like, why is Maine as a program scheduling these intersectional matches at really far distances, considering how kind of remote they are, I guess, in their own conference too. So I believe the northernmost school in the Colonial Athletic Association, and they're scheduling these intersectional games because there's not just these two FBS games. They also have visits to North Dakota State and Montana State coming up. So I mean, Dan, I want to know your thoughts on this.
Maine is an aggressive out-of-conference scheduler, somewhat out of necessity, but they also just don't shy away from it. Now, Nick Charlton while he was the head coach at Maine, was the youngest head coach in the CAA. So I feel like I connected with it. When I was first getting started and doing conference media calls regularly, I feel like I kind of connected with Coach Charlton a little bit, if only because like I could relate to him. He seemed like he's a professional. He is on top of his game. I don't cite his youth as a disqualifier whatsoever, because I guess I'd be doing that to myself too if I were to say that. But all that to say, I always felt like we connected a little bit, even if it was over Zoom and whatnot on those media calls. And he spoke openly many times about this is how it is at Maine. We're going to be playing 2 FBS games annually as a matter of certainly the guarantees help the budget, and it's something that was necessary for the bottom line, or really just balancing out expenses at Maine, but also because they just don't shy away from the challenge. I mean, it's not as if Maine is scheduling 2 Power Fives annually. You're typically seeing them play, a remote group of 5 relative to them geographically, and then maybe a Power 5 or G5 who's a little more geographically sensible, at least as sensible as you can get for the northernmost school in the FCS, in all of the FCS, or at least in the East Coast FCS. I won't test myself on the across East and West geography. Who is the higher, who's northernmost, I guess, from Maine to the West Coast. I guess I won't get myself in that hole, but certainly for Maine, this is a common sight for me to see, for longtime CA observers to see a game at New Mexico, and then a couple weeks later heading to Boston College. This is just something that Maine has embraced. I think competitively it does hurt, because when you're looking at a brutal CEA schedule year in and year out, you could look at the CEA and say it's a little bit less so than it is in the past, with losing the kingpin in JMU and needing to see how Hampton and Monmouth adjust to that new setting before A&T arrives in 2023. So certainly, even when you take the changing CEA into account, it's a difficult conference schedule, let alone having 2 FBS games annually. So I think it hurts Maine, certainly from a competitive point. It'd be hard to argue anything else. I guess that's stating the obvious. But they have a propensity to pull it off because they're scheduling at least one FBS game that I would say reasonable. And the word is winnable, sometimes a winnable game, but that's a little extreme to say. But reasonable games, like such as the one in New Mexico, Maine's taken them. I mean, they did defeat UMass, who you can't necessarily say is a to write home about, but it's an FBS win. The scholarship difference is there. So we can all make the jokes about UMass, and everyone loves to tweet, UMass will be down in the CAA before they know it. They'll be dropping down before they know it. I don't know that's realistic, given everything that UMass is trying to do to find an FBS conference home for football. But certainly UMass, it's no Titan in the FBS. Maine just thumped them in 2021. I mean, the Maine athletic department right now is running a story on goblackbears.com, which they're doing a great job with, by the way, which is a series of Maine's across its athletic department, its top moments of this past academic year that we just completed here as June ended. And number 5 ranked by the Maine department was football beating UMass, and they got their 4th FBS win in program history with that win. It just, the fact that it was a plus 25 win differential, to win 35-10 in Amherst, it was just a great look for the CEA. Of course, the CEA doesn't mind defeating UMass after it left for the CEA and the FCS for FBS independence years ago, and a stint in the MAC as well. But that's all enough UMass talk for now. But it is something that Maine doesn't shy away from. They've gotten a win as recently as last fall, playing an FBS foe. And so I think Jordan Stevens, who takes over for Coach Charlton, who is now the OC at UConn for Jim Mora, Jordan Stevens is a Maine man himself. He's a Maine alumnus, so this is nothing new to him either. He embraces this is that black hole identity of Maine. They play that hard-nosed style of play, especially on defense, and they take that to 2 FBS teams a year.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was not aware that they scheduled 2 teams a year, and that was like their model. I was aware that they did beat UMass because UMass got dumped. They went 0-2 in CAA play this past year. Which if you look at this game with New Mexico this year, you have a team in New Mexico, the worst offense in the conference on a lot of metrics, like the worst offense, averaging only 12 points a game. But again, like if you look at conference strength, at the base level, New Mexico is in a conference and probably the second best group of 5 conference, if not a conference that will be the best group of 5 conference once all those teams defect from the American in 2023. And this is a very winnable game for Maine, honestly, with especially with the offensive woes of New Mexico, UNM. Houston Baptist was very competitive this past year, without, of course, this being their first post Bailey Zappi year. They were competitive in that game, only losing 27-17. And this would be a really quality win. It's not just a win that people dismiss like, hey, it's UMass. New Mexico, they beat Wyoming, a team that beat Kent State in the Potato Bowl, a division champion, a group of 5 division champion in the Potato Bowl. So this is a very solid win. And I guess like in terms of funding too, because the travel, it's only going to get worse, I guess, in the CAA with them adding those southern teams. For Maine, it's only going to get worse for them in terms of football. So like getting those funds is very key. But yeah, I kind of wonder too, if this serves as sort of like a recruiting advantage. And I guess an incentive for fans of the program to like travel and make these trips, because I compiled a short list of like future trips that are similar in nature to this. I only found like 3 schools making trips like this. You have Stony Brook going to San Diego State in 2025. You have Rhode Island going to Atlanta and facing Georgia State at Center Park Stadium, of course, the former home of the Braves. Mm-hmm. And then you have Monmouth going down to Miami the next year as well, which it's a bit of a kind of a faux CAA AAC challenge, I guess. So what's it called? Like, or it's like an anagram, or it's like a palindrome, a bit of a palindrome challenge with those 2.
Palindrome challenge. That's a good one. Yeah, we have to take that and run with it.
Yeah, a palindrome challenge of between those 2 conferences. So I kind of wonder if this serves as like a recruiting advantage. For Maine fans to see Albuquerque, taste some of the green chili that I've enjoyed for during most of my teenage years, and then going to Miami for especially, more so Miami than Albuquerque. I'm gonna call a spade a spade. Miami is a better vacation spot than Albuquerque. All year. So yeah, I kind of wanted that. I want to get your take on that.
Well, I think it's interesting. So to ask about recruiting, Maine has a special battle when it comes to recruiting, because they need to recruit certain kinds of players who are ready to go to out-of-state players many times, because Maine is not known as an FCS high school, even an FCS level recruiting, hotbed, anything near that for the FCS level of play. So not to slander Maine high school football, because I'm not a Maine high school football expert, but I'm just, in general, you see a lot of players on Maine's roster who are from out of state, and Maine is winning over those players who are willing to willing. I say willing to only because they're adjusting to the extreme winters of Orono, playing up in the northernmost school in the CEA and one of the most northern in all of the FCS. It's just up there. It's remote. So making these trips, it is appealing to players across the board, wherever you are geographically playing an FBS opponent, you're getting the environment of playing an FBS school. And so that kind of applies across the board, I guess. So it's not as much specific to Maine. Fan wise, I'm not certain how enthusiastic Maine fans would be about the length of, like, every year there's a longer FBS trip, but it's coupled by a shorter FBS trip, such as this year's to Boston College. So I think it probably evens out for fans. You know, the most dedicated followers of Maine football can appreciate that they're getting a couple checks a year. The program is getting supported that way. And at least one of those checks, the fans also win a little bit because they get a chance to show the support. And in the case of the UMass game, I'm sure there were some Black Bear fans in Amherst who are just having a ball to be winning by over 20 against an FBS opponent who was a conference rival not that many years ago. But in recruiting, Maine relies more so on its, you know, how Eastern Washington uses EKGs, Eastern kind of guys. Which is a very popular slogan for Eastern Washington. Maine is really a mirror of that, which is funny the way they met in the semifinals years ago in 2018 when Maine made that run in the FCS playoffs. It's funny because I really think of these programs as mirroring each other. Maine is known as kind of that black hole. Their stadium is getting a lot of work. I call it the black hole because of the black hole defense that Maine likes to call it itself or refer to itself as. And they're putting a lot of updates in that stadium, new turf, enclosing one end zone, doing work on a multi-purpose facility that will be beyond one of the end zones through support of the Harold Alfond Foundation that's really providing a lot of transformational money to get those facilities up to a competitive level in the CAA, even after JMU and its facilities are long gone. So I think that Maine is doing all it can to continue to kind of mirror what Eastern Washington does in recruiting Maine kind of guys. There's MKGs, which I guess that's a machine gun, or no, that's Machine Gun Kelly's MGK. Okay, MKGs. I'm getting my letters confused too now. MKGs, Maine kind of guys. And those are the guys that's the kind of brand that Maine wants. So I think especially Jordan Stevens coming in, being a Maine alumnus, he'll just continue that very seamlessly. From first was Joe Harrisimiak, of course, who was very successful as a coach leading that 2018 playoff run. And that included a CAA championship. The Maine won that CAA championship that year. So that was just really something, a real pinnacle of their recent program history. But it's been going from Harrisimiak to Charlton. I have a lot of confidence that Jordan Stevens, another young coach, as it turns out, but somebody who is a Maine kind of guy himself. So that's really, I think, where Maine recruiting is focused on. But there's a balance to these trips, right? It goes back to our first point of discussion is there's a longer one, and then they're strategically coupling that with a trip such as BC, such as UMass. There may be other more regional games that I don't have in front of me as well, but it is definitely, I think, a responsible way for Maine to schedule. They're not just taking the biggest check they can get, because they could just go ahead and go to New Mexico and go to like Oklahoma or something, right? Like they could just cash the biggest checks possible. But that's just not that hasn't been their style or approach. They've been more strategic about that. And I have a lot of respect for that. So even though it's something that's very necessary for Maine to do, it's something that I don't foresee them really changing their tune on in future years, just because they're locking themselves into these schedules years ahead, which, I mean, it's not new. Everybody is doing that, making sure they're getting their games in place. But because they're making these commitments, I don't see it changing anytime soon. But it's a responsible way of going about it, because they're not simply in it for the most money, flying their players across the nation, in a span of a couple of weeks to play two Power Fives in something that would be a little more outrageous in terms of competitiveness and player safety.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point for sure too. I mean, about like the recruiting of a Maine kind of guy. And to expand upon your recruiting point, I mean, just having, I guess, that sort of game in Miami, next year could do wonders for, having a foot in that recruiting territory, and giving, I guess, players the possibility of playing in front of their family in Miami, in that rich Miami recruiting area. I mean, one of the richest in the country. I gotta say, before we turn the page on this topic, one word of advice for Maine fans is, if for, I guess, Maine attendees, if your girlfriend says she's going on a trip to Miami, girls trip to see Maine FIU Miami, gentlemen, that's not your girlfriend anymore. That's all I gotta say. It's like don't fall for it. I mean, and I'm just warning you guys in advance. Sorry about it, but
you knew about it ahead of time. Now can't say you didn't hear about it. Omar told you.
Yeah, just go back to this trip, and I warned you. But I mean, yeah, that's a great point too, where I guess like they got to recruit out of state too, and I guess playing in I guess these like large, large markets, elsewhere. Even though, I mean, New Mexico is kind of a barren land in terms of college football recruiting. I mean, anytime that I played in high school and there was like a guy that was even recruited by a D1 school outside of the state in Mex, we were like, oh man, that guy's got that dog in him, So yeah, but I mean that's a great point for sure. I guess looking at these games, like I guess turning the page and looking at these games and their actual outcomes. How does how does Maine fare, especially in this game against New Mexico this year? And then I guess looking ahead into Florida International, because like Florida International is probably one of the worst programs in college football, I guess, and they will be, I think, a long term until they get a new administration that actually cares about football. To not, I guess, put it bluntly.
I absolutely, I agree with you about FIU. Reading some of the stuff that's come out of the reporting there has been really, that's another podcast probably, but it's kind of staggering stuff for even a G5 level. I mean, once you're in the FBS, you wouldn't expect to see that stuff. But anyway, that's a tangent that I'll stay away from for now to stay locked in on the Black Bears. I think the biggest story when you look at Maine this year and you try to project their entire schedule and not just the FBS opponents is the return of Joe Fagnano at quarterback. They lost Fagnano to injury when they were playing in Harrisonburg against James Madison. And Derek Robertson, the backup quarterback, stepped in and really, I thought, developed as the year went on. I give Nick Charlton a lot of credit for helping Derek through that process, but you got to give Robertson credit to his own merit for growing into that role and keeping Maine. Maine was a competitive team through the end of November. They did not completely falter. This is a team that finished with a respectable record in the CAA. Certainly had a stronger finish than some others. I mean, I'm right here at Delaware, and Delaware endured a coaching change right after the season concluded. So, some schools hit the skids down the stretch when it's an uphill battle. When you see it's an uphill battle in October, some schools don't respond as well to that as others. But Maine had that. This is all the intangible stuff and all the fluffy duffy. But I gotta say, I do think Maine had that dog in them, to steal your phrase from earlier. So Joe Fagnano returning from his injury at quarterback this season is a big start for Maine. This is a program that has turned out some really nice talent, but has lost it to other programs. I think of Ramon Jefferson, who before he burst on the scene to everybody else at Sam Houston, he was a really nice tailback at Maine. So this is a team that still has Jameel Wiley at defensive line. He's going to be a graduate student from my home state of Delaware. He's from Newcastle, which is across the way from me here in my county. So got to shout out a 302 product in Wiley. But I like the quarterback depth to get back to QBs, to have both Robertson and Fagnano back. Really, you like having two options, especially the way CAA games are played, still very defensive oriented. You're going to need a couple quarterbacks who have game experience to really feel good about where you are. Just some other talent sprinkled throughout the main roster that really stands out to me. Elijah Barnwell is a running back transfer from Rutgers who got some experience last season, and I'd look for him to really take another step up and improve his Big Ten background. Of course, you don't just get starts or get carries from by the name of the school that you transferred from, but I think Elijah Barnwell has a chance to really to earn more of those reps and continue what's been a nice Maine running back tradition. I think as far back as Joshua Mack, you'll probably remember that name. He ended up at Liberty. Josh Mack was another running back who was at Maine. So, but the skill positions really have more talent than people really give credit. Sean Bowman is another Delaware native, actually. He's from Bear, Delaware, and he's a senior tight end who I really like. So really, I'm just looking through this roster and seeing names that you recognize as being, if not all conference, near all conference players. So you look at Maine overall, their CAA schedule breaks in some good ways. I think they avoid Delaware this season, who is traditionally, and I say this I keep mentioning Delaware and everything, but the Blue Hens are preseason top 25 ranks, and Delaware is not in the schedule at all. The Black Bears host Villanova and Monmouth, and I consider two of those schools to be heavy playoff contenders as well. So you get those schools at home. And you get Richmond at home as well. So some of your toughest games on your schedule are at home. You don't go to Delaware. You don't play Delaware at all, as I've said. And you do, of course, get New Hampshire, which is New Hampshire with Rick Santos at the helm there, kind of continuing what Sean McDonald's done, but also giving a new flavor, a new boost there will be very interesting as well. So Maine, if it can take care of business, I'd say it might be a team that's underrated in the preseason poll. I mean, I could see them anywhere from like 7 to, I can't see Maine in double digits, but maybe they would get disrespected to that level. I could see Maine getting that disrespect, but I see them outperforming their preseason poll expectation wherever they do fall, unless it's top 6 in the conference in preseason poll. That predicted order of finish might not look so good because Maine has that propensity just to turn heads a little bit as the year goes on. It's putting a lot of trust in Jordan Stevens as a first-year head coach, but at the same time, that Bryce Cal Musket game. We talked about all fair about the Bryce Cal Musket, UNH Maine. That could be very meaningful if UNH turns things around as well. So that's a long-winded answer to say that I think Maine is one of those schools that folks in the CA forget about sometimes, or maybe get excluded from the conversations of contenders annually. But there are some dogs on the roster. It's a matter of putting it together. We really didn't get to see a full Maine team. Losing Fagnano is a big deal. He's an all-conference quarterback. He really might make some more national noise. He can just put together a full season, and he has the support of the rest of his offense. But I do like Maine. It's putting a lot of trust in Maine. There could be tricky spots along the way. Of course, having 2 FBS games, you could end up with 2 losses before you even enter October, so that's troublesome. There's a road trip to Stony Brook, which I think Stony Brook is one of the schools that I'd want to have on the road, and that's a road trip I would take if I'm Maine, but certainly it's not necessarily an easy game to have at all. Delaware got whipped pretty good at Stony Brook this past fall, so that is just the longest answer ever to say that I do like Maine. I do like his outlook, not just in the FBS games, but overall. But the bigger FBS game that to pay attention to competitively would be that New Mexico game, because BC. I talk about recruiting where Maine's recruiting the Maine kind of guys. Boston College wins a lot of those recruiting battles just naturally. They're a P5. They can run New England in some ways in recruiting. So Boston College might be a tough ask, but that New Mexico game right out the gates, that's where you want to catch a team napping in its opener.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I don't think they'll be going to as tough an environment with UNM, because I mean, I've been to that stage and been to a few home games in my day. Mm-hmm. This is a program that is kind of, I won't say far, but it's not the Bob Davie years. I mean, the Bob Davie years coincide when I was in high school, the height of the program, couple 8-4 years. You had them beating beating Boise State on the road, and one of the biggest point spread upsets of the decade that year. And then they ended up playing Arizona in a game that I was at. I mean, they played Arizona in the Mexico Bowl and played them neck and neck in 2015. And then the next year, the pieces were just put together where they were in the mix to win the Mountain West Mountain Division, and all because of that triple option offense. And I mean, if I'm being honest, they should switch back to that full time. But that's another discussion for another time. We saw shades of that, but only out of necessity against Boise State, where I thought I heard something about New Mexico running triple option, and I found out it was in the Boise State game where they had a walk-on, I guess, like not a walk-on, but a student manager that used to play on the team, playing quarterback that game. Wow. One of the wilder stories in the 2021 season. But definitely, I feel like the formula for beating there's a couple formulas for beating an FBS team. There's the Eastern Washington approach where like you engage in a shootout, and the best gun wins. Like the more accurate, more potent gun wins, more potent offense wins. We've seen that with Eastern Washington from time and time again. There's also the approach where like you wear teams down, you stay in the game, and you wait for your team to make mistakes. And the second time, and this approach, I can see this shaping out for Maine with a strong run game with the quarterback and Joe Fagnano, who can make plays. I know they're returning their leading rusher. I believe Maine's returning their leading rusher from the season last year. So, and the defense wasn't bad by today's standards. They weren't great, allowing 27 points per game, but that's not bad at all. So, I mean, especially with an offense as inefficient as New Mexico was, I don't have the advanced metrics in front of me, but I just have the old school statistics in my Athlon Sports preview. But yeah, like this is definitely a game to watch out. Now, Boston College, I've been on the Boston College hype train for the past 2 years, and I will continue to be on the hype train with the Phil Dracovic. I mean, maybe they can be competitive in that one. I mean, they can be competitive. I just don't see them winning it. But if with all the factors of New Mexico being how they played last year, and like this lack of a significant home field advantage, where you have a lot of New Mexico fans probably looking at this as a game like where they shouldn't care. I mean, there's no regionality to it. It's an intersectional matchup, which I mean, not everyone's like me loving these intersectional games. So
I can appreciate them. You're not alone. I can appreciate them. You're not alone. Now, see, this USC UCLA intersectional stuff becoming a conference is a different story, maybe. But that again, let me not interrupt this whole podcast for a totally different, like 3 podcasts in one, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, on that note, USC and UCLA moving to the Big Ten kind of spoils the charm of intersectional matchups, because like these games used to be very rare. I mean, not very rare, but like there's only a few games a year, even in this day and age, that are like true, like bona fide intersectional matchups with like these two matchups with Maine and New Mexico, and Maine and Florida International, being like those like true old school like snowbird type trips where you're getting out
Mhm.
of the cold of Maine into these warm environments. But yeah, like I mean, I'm excited to see where they end up in. I mean, this could be a signature win for the CAA, and even then, like if they have that signature win, I mean, there's still the CAA like slate that they have to get through, honestly. And yeah, so I mean, it's intriguing. Their FBS games are intriguing, and their slate is too. I mean, sometimes in a conference, you mentioned that they dodged Delaware this year. Sometimes in a conference, that's all it takes. In a large conference, dodging those teams is all it takes, especially when it comes to either making a conference championship run in the FBS or getting that at-large spot in the FCS, which is a case where it's like you dodge those teams, there's a plausible deniability that the team
Right.
is, that the team is good. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be looking forward to it.
Well, let me clarify too. I just look at me. I'm gonna be derided as a Delaware guy here. I'll bring up the Blue Lens one more time. Maine avoids Delaware with Nolan Henderson or the Delaware without Nolan Henderson, because if Delaware does not have Nolan Henderson for some point of the season, then it's not the same. It's not even a dodge. It's just like, oh, they could have played Delaware without Nolan Henderson. That probably would have worked out okay for me. So that's Delaware stories. They'll need Nolan Henderson healthy at quarterback. But looking at Maine's team stats again, just because you brought up, I wanted to go even deeper. So among CEA offenses who are returning, so I'm excluding James Madison's rolling up 38.3 points a game in 2021. Maine finished third among returning CEA schools with 25 points a game, and that was without Joe Fagnano at quarterback for much of the season. So that's really telling. Now, I was somewhat surprised to see that 25 points a game was good for fourth overall in the league in 2021, counting James Madison, but it is a defensive conference. I still think in many ways. Now, I could be completely off base, and this fall could be opening up the floodgates when it comes to scoring. As a couple new schools coming in, maybe things change up just a tad. But so Maine has a little ways to go on defense. Maybe the black hole defense needs to tighten up a little bit. It can't be feeling too. I mean, they allowed 10 points against UMass, but maybe they need to tighten up on the FCS competition, and that's something that's very doable. Coach Stevens' background is on defense. I believe he was a linebacker, or I believe he played on defense in his time at Maine. I should have that footnote in front of me, but he is just, you wouldn't be a Maine kind of guy if you weren't defense first, or at least defense priority. Where I mean, it's not like that everywhere. Delaware just hired a very offensive minded coach, and that's their own strategy. They're going to become kind of an offensive minded program in some ways. But so certainly got a lot of respect for Maine, what it was able to do on offense. The fact that they finished third in the conference in points a game without Fagnano. But it's going to take a balanced team to make its way through that CEA schedule, because if you have any deficiencies, you're going to be exposed. That happens in the Big Sky and the Missouri Valley and many other FCS leagues too. But I just think in the CEA, where it's very close top to bottom in terms of, it's not really that much of a shock to see the bottom team, the quote bottom team, take off anybody but JMU in the past, really. Like, I mean, now the way it's constructed this fall, week to week, you don't know what you're going to get even more than it has been in the recent past. So Maine, to survive that, will need to be a little more balanced. But looking at the offense more closely, those points per game, I believe the efficiency, the rushing and passing totals. I mean, there are things to work with here. When you're Maine. Maine was not really a bottom feeder statistically, even though they just don't get talked. It just, you think they were a bottom feeder, not to disrespect the program, but it's just that the discussion isn't there as much. So, I mean, I got a lot of respect for the Bangor Daily News, who does a great job covering Maine on the beat. I cross paths a little bit with their beat reporter on Zoom and whatnot. But this is a matter of the conversation nationally. That dialogue isn't there. So I'm glad that you brought it up. I'm glad you reached out. And yeah, I mean, we're going to see exactly what Maine is made of with a healthy Joe Fagnano, because I wrote about in a Hero Sports column, well, I guess it was a column in some ways, just pointing out the fact that the CA race's complexion was changed completely by the number of starting quarterback injuries that had occurred. UNH didn't even have Max Brosmer all season long. It's easy to forget that Brosmer was out before things even got going with his own injury that was season ending. So certainly these quarterbacks across the board in the league, Maine is no different, getting its starter back. And it's a school that should not be slept on. Don't sleep on the Black Bears. Don't hibernate. Because I'll gas them up on the pod, but I really think it's going to age okay, or more than okay, because Maine doesn't really let you down. That 2018 run is deep in my mind. That was an impressive run to go on the road to Weber State and take a win like that to advance to the semifinals. I know that they had to fly to Weber, back home, and then back out to Shaney to face Eastern Washington, and that didn't go so well in the semifinals that they did make in 2018. But Maine is a program with that potential. I mean, we talked off air a little bit. What is the program all about? They were in the Final Four of the FCS about 4 years ago. So I do not have, I don't hesitate to say that Maine is a school that should continue to be mentioned.
Yeah, and you mentioned the semifinal appearance like 4 years ago. I feel like that's what you get with a regionally charged league. I guess not charged, regionally centered league. Kind of like the MAC, how the MAC's always cyclical. And I feel like I've mentioned that too when we're talking CA. I feel like I mentioned this to you like before, like you have a geographical league with like, you know, I guess schools like fighting for the same recruiting resources where it's just bound to cycle through. Like I think you mentioned Rhode Island not making the playoffs since like 2015 or so, being like that team the longest drought in the conference. So I mean, it's cyclical. I mean, they could have next. The Black Bears could have next, and yeah. I mean, that's really all I have to say. I do want to address an error I made and an error of omission that I made in the
Okay.
podcast. Of course, I didn't mention next year's trip to Hawaii for Albany, being one of those huge intersectional games. I failed to mention that. So, Great Danes fans, please apologize. And I just got to say one word of advice. You know, use a football game as an excuse to visit Hawaii. Be a
Yep.
man. So that's all I got to say there. I mean,
Well,
that's what I'm doing
that's
in
after they go to
2028.
Waco for Baylor this fall. I'll interject real quickly.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah,
that's
exactly. Yeah, my friend or you know, co-host Jackson, you know, did live in Waco for some time, you know, went to the Texas Tech campus in Waco. So if he was still there, I was telling Jackson, I was like, hey Jackson, be the tour guide for the great people of Albany. I think I tweeted that out in you know, FC when FB schedule was released that matchup. But yeah, I mean, I know on that Hawaii note, I'll be using the Fordham Hawaii game in 2028 already as a excuse to go to Hawaii. And yeah, I remember I was at a game at Rose Hill Gymnasium, the winter of 2020. But when that game, the year that game was actually supposed to be played, and they advertised the Rams in Paradise travel package, and it had
yeah.
the Rams logo with a lay around its neck, or
Oh my
with a
God.
lay around it, and it said like it was like you know, you stay in the team hotel. I forgot the price of the package. It was a really good deal. Like, of course, you fly there on your own, but you pay for the team's like. I mean, you're on like the team hotel. You get treated to a Fordham Rams luau, which sounds very lit, even for a
Oh
Holy
my
Cross fan.
God.
Even for a Holy Cross fan like myself, I'll take part in the luau. But yeah, that's something that I'm already looking forward to too, as my excuse to visit the islands. So yeah.
Well, I think some I know some other kids at some other schools, they gotta get in their phone at their athletic department and say, can we get a Hawaii game scheduled by X year so we can partake in a student luau? Oh my gosh, a student luau in particular would be. I'm just thinking about the possibilities. Call that a heck of a tailgate, right? That'd be a particularly
Oh yeah.
great tailgate. So, oh my goodness, you're not going to get that necessarily if you're let's see. If you're like Richmond playing at UVA, you just don't get the same experience
Yeah.
as if you're down in Hawaii. So that's a good deal. I'm glad you're taking that up.
Yeah, I mean already 6 years in advance, but that's like for me, I told my mom, I was like, Mom, like that's the cutoff for like when I will start trying to have kids if I'm in a if I'm you know if I'm married by that time. I will start trying to have kids after that because I don't want my kids to hate me for leaving them at home while I go to Hawaii. I don't want my kids to hate me for that. So you know there's no chance of them them doing that if they're not born yet. So
Hey, you know
um
what? I think that you have it all planned out. You have it all planned out.
I mean, that's these college football ADs, you know, they it's not like college basketball where like I found out that West Point was playing in London. I found out yesterday and I was pissed. I'm like, that's something that like you should tell like your fans a year in advance that you're gonna play a multi-team event in London. Like, you know, I mean, yeah, but that's another venting point for another time. But yeah, I mean, I'm thankful. A lot of people hate like the matchups far in the future, but I'm a fan of it too, where I can just like list off games that I want to take trips to, and that's that.
No, I think the point about MTEs is fascinating because especially if it's a long distance MTE, such as going over across the pond. I mean, Delaware is reportedly Rocco Miller does a great job at Rocco Miller on Twitter. Great follow,
Oh, I
college
love that.
basketball
Yeah,
scheduling
I love this
insider.
account.
I know he's a great resource for us all, especially in this neck of the woods. Or at least I say my current neck, East Coast, is I'm losing track. Is an MTE at Penn. Delaware will look to be heading to the Palestra for the
Nice.
first time in I want to say a long time or ever. I don't know if Delaware's competed at the Palestra in my lifetime anyway. So I'm showing my age here. I
Gotta
don't
do
think
it. You
I've
gotta
seen
go.
Delaware in the
You gotta go,
Palestra. So,
Dash.
and I'm gonna fact check. It's gonna be an error or omission when Delaware's men's basketball is like playing at Penn in the year 19. You fill in the blanks, right? So
Yeah.
I'll take the error or omission there if need be. But I do think that the MTEs that get announced, they're a close range. Sure, you can always plan a trip to Philly later that year. But if you're talking about London, yeah, those West Point fans, they're saying it. Well, we're scrambling a little bit now if you want to make that MTE, but the one MTE that this is getting totally off on an MTE tangent that I can think of talking to the MAC commissioner about, and you've written about the MAC in Dublin, the MAC challenge with it getting its basketball out there in that part of the world is interesting, and that's something that's kind of leaking out slowly and gradually in some ways. So that you can plan for, I guess, but others not so much.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's just something I'll have to like digest it in like that weekend anyway. It's like this year was the year I was planning to go to the Bayou Classic anyway. So I mean, I guess it's a moot point, but yeah, maybe next time Army plays in a really good MTE, hopefully I'll be able to be there. So I guess that's a good point to close on. We've already strayed from our topic. But this was great, Dan. Always a pleasure to have these discussions with you too. And I mean, I learned more about FCS and the CAA. Every time we talk. So
Hey, I'm so glad to do it. It had been too long, so thanks for bearing with me. And once again, yeah, I mean, my only note for you would be talking about travel and talking about years in advance and planning. But this is our whole overarching. We'll say the one topic is all travel and years ahead, right? That's our one topic. We didn't stray at all. So
yeah.
if that is our topic, I will say, got to get you in Frisco sometime for an FCS championship where we'll
Oh man,
overlap
I'm considering
sometime.
it.
So
I'm considering it this year for sure. Like just making the drive over, just like road tripping. Yeah, I mean, because like I'm only 9 hours away out here in El Paso. So I mean, very manageable drive. Don't have to fly there too. And the
mhm.
game's at noon. So like, just fly there Friday after work, stay in a hotel and just like head back the night after.
Yep.
You know. But yeah, like, I'm excited too. I mean, hopefully if it's not a North Dakota State, if it's not a North Dakota State national title, that then I'd be more inclined to like get a ticket and stuff like that and make the trip. But even then, if it's North Dakota State, I guess I wouldn't mind. But yeah, like that's definitely a plan while I'm down here to check out the FCS title game out here in Frisco.
I don't blame you for wanting to see somebody different, somebody other than NDSU. But if you get a chance to see an NDSU crowd in person, you got shot. If you can't get to the Fargo Dome, that
So sorry, a brief note. Dan has had his Wi-Fi cut out due to a Wi-Fi storm. I wish I could hear what he was gonna say to the end of it. So this will be the close of our podcast. I'll have this edited in. But as always, it was a pleasure to have Dan on the pod, and we look forward to having him again. And until next time, everyone, tune in to the Hardware Pod on the Between the Stripes Podcast Network. Peace, love, and soul, everyone.